Hey, George, you're a scientist.
I'm a chemist, yes.
Right, you're a scientist. So, I was thinking about like magic metals, magic materials, like the kind of stuff comic book movie crap, right? Your vibraniums, your adamantiums, your, magic material X. I don't think the thing the Powerpuff Girls was made with was metal. It was chemical X. It wasn't a metal. It might have been a metal. Maybe it was mercury. Who knows? Mercury gives you superpowers.
They're all good chemicals, Brent.
They're all good chemicals. And we had talked one time about like infinite chemicals and can you just keep like adding up protons and electrons and get more crap. But the magic materials like a vibranium or an adamantium or whatever, like they always have like very specific magic properties and not like infinite magic properties. They're not Superman materials that just have like whatever superpowers the scene needs, right? They're usually specifically good at like one very specific thing. Can you have materials that extreme? Can you have a vibranium? Can you have an adamantium? Will you give me some magic materials, please?
Well, darn it, Lions. I am a chemist, not a materials scientist. But with my very limited knowledge and very limited expertise, I will attempt to opine to this. So I like that you bring up the other episode that we did on can the periodic table go on forever? Because that was the very first thing I referenced, because technically we did answer this question there, which is no. But then I thought about it and I was like, okay, but we should do a quick refresher as kind of the foundation of this episode. And then I thought I could do the thing that always horrifies you, which is ask you, why can't the periodic table go on forever?
I don't think I remember well.
Pop quiz, hot shot.
Yeah. I should have foreseen this. So I think there are the limits come in with like the integrity of the atom itself, right? So you just keep piling crap on there, and eventually the intermolecular forces don't hold, like they're no longer cohesive, right? I think you have positively charged protons and negatively charged electrons, and so once there are so many protons, it's no longer makes like a cohesive. It won't like stay together.
Yep. Yeah. No. I mean that is absolutely correct.
Yay!
To just sprinkle a little cinnamon on top of your dessert. Yeah. So you kind of nailed it. So basically, there's 4 primary elemental forces, right? And it'd be cool if they were like earth, water, fire, air.
That would be so cool.
But they're not. It would be cool, right?
But if they were, then we would think the real names are cool, because you always want the thing you don't have.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And also, too, Aristotle actually shut down somebody when there was a Greek philosopher years ago who said, what if you cut something so much that you just couldn't cut it anymore? That would be the atomos, the uncuttable. And Aristotle said, no, dummy, it's 4 elements, and set us back 2,000 years. So that's a bummer. So there are 4 elemental forces, and so it's gravity, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, and electromagnetism, right? So the electromagnetic force, as we all know, is positive repulses positive, right? And negative repulses negative. So inside of the nucleus, there is positive charged stuff and neutrally charged stuff, the protons and the neutrons. So electromagnetically, those things should just fly apart always, forever, right? Because there's nothing cohesive holding it together, as you said. But it is the strong nuclear force that holds it all together. But as the atom gets bigger and bigger and bigger on the inside, eventually things get far enough apart that the strong nuclear force isn't strong enough, like over that distance, and then electromagnetism starts to take over, and then it starts to push itself apart. So that's the sciencey way of saying, as you said, it gets too big to stay cohesive, right? So nailed it. There's also another thought that that basically eventually the atom gets so large that the electrons that are like, basically they're not orbiting, it's a probability field, but they still need to move, and in order for them to move across the orbit would be so large that they would have to move faster than the speed of light in order to do that, which is also kind of cool.
I also think it's kind of fun that at space sizes, like cosmological sizes and atomic sizes, the speed of light like still matters. Because you would think like, oh, well, it's an atom. Like, how long could it possibly take to get from one side of the atom to the other? And it's like, well, I mean, if you have a big enough atom, then it matters.
Yeah, the speed of light is like a real bummer, because in the sense of like, we all think of it as like how fast, oh my God, it's the speed of light. It is effectively infinitely fast. And that is true, except for certain applications where it's like,
for
oh my
all
God,
the
it's
times
so
it's
slow. It's so slow. Like, it's just like, oh man, the speed of light. Like, I turn on a light and it lights up the room instantaneously. It's like, yeah, it's like, I want to get to the nearest star. It's going to take you 4 years at best. You're like that. Well, that's a bummer. It's just like what if somebody extinguished the sun? It's like, well, then we would have 8 minutes of blissful ignorance, and then everything would fall to pieces. With that in mind, so there are some scientists who believe that there could be what are called islands of stability, right? Where you can have a magic number of protons and neutrons where they can configure in just this special way where they could actually be cohesive, right? But as it stands right now, as we add more protons and neutrons into the atom, they become less and less stable to the point like where I believe that some of them are only stable for like hundredths or thousandths or billionths of a second, right? And then they fly apart and decay, right, into a more stable form. So even if we make the argument that there would be an island of stability way further down on the periodic table, and that is where vibranium is housed, and for whatever reason it has all of these amazing properties, even the most optimistic science, so it would, most people believe it would, even these islands of stability would only be stable for like minutes or hours. There are some very optimistic scientists who believe it could be stable for like millions of years, right?
But that is a lot more optimistic than minutes or hours.
Very. But nonetheless, and I thought that this was kind of interesting, is that even if it has a half-life, if it has a half-life of an hour, or if it has a half-life of a million years, you know what it still has? A half-life.
Yeah.
Which, you know what that means it is?
Temporary.
Temporary, and also radioactive. So,
yeah.
Right? Because it's decaying.
Right.
And when it does that, it's not great. So like, only Wolverine would be able to, maybe the reason why Wolverine is the only one that can have adamantium in his bones isn't because he's the only one that could survive the procedure. It's because it's radioactive, and he's the only one who
can survive the cancer.
What do? We put cancer metal into you. It's really strong, but it's a lot of cancer. So I say all of that to say, I think that, in my opinion, that basically the idea with all of these magic metals is that they need a magic metal, right? They needed adamant. They need Wolverine's skeleton to be indestructible, because otherwise, if he broke his bone and his healing factor kicked in, then his bone would heal improperly and gross, so like, and they need Captain America's shield to have some magical special properties, because otherwise Thanos would punch him and it would be the punch that liquefied all of his internal organs, and because just what else are you going to do? So if we're playing with magic, right, I thought, what's more interesting than finding a magic metal that you dug up out of the ground, right? Because that's what all this comes from. It's like, oh, vibranium, it's super rare and it's only found in this place. And then we dig it up and then we make it into stuff, right? Is what would be cooler, in my opinion, is specific alloys, right? Is don't make it so that way it's just like some thing we found on the ground and it's magic, right? Make it so that way there's a manufacturing process to make this thing that is so crazy difficult, convoluted, whatever, that's what makes it rare, and also what makes it cool, right?
Yeah. And I was wondering, I didn't want to interrupt you at first, but the thought that started circling in my head was, are all the magic metals and magic materials that I could think of, are they all naturally occurring? And the handful that I had at my fingertips, the answer is yes, right? Like, vibranium in an asteroid that fell to Earth, and adamantium is like a rare thing that you can just find if you're lucky, and unobtainium from the planet of Pandora, right? Like there's, but these are naturally occurring things that just either are super rare in our environment, or you have to actually go to a whole ass other environment to get them, right? But if you don't need an individual atom to be magic, you can have like a magic molecule, a magic compound, then maybe magic.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, now it's super, super awesome. So, here's this will be fun. What is the strongest, and because there's so many different ways to measure strength, right? Like there's tensile strength, there's impact strength, blah, 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 blah. But the densest, and this isn't always true, but in this case, by extension, one of the strongest metals, guess. Let's do 3 guesses. What do you think?
Like just a pure metal?
Yes, an actual element.
I think maybe tungsten.
Yeah, nailed it, man. Got it in 1. Well done.
Nice.
Yes, tungsten.
Yeah, the only reason I even had that handy is two things. One, my father is something of a carpenter, and I know there are some tools that either are tungsten or have like tungsten bits or whatever for like specific things. And 2, my original wedding band is tungsten, and I remember that when you buy a tungsten band, that they give you a little warning that's like, if your finger starts to swell, you had better take this damn thing off, because it's not like a gold wedding band where the EMTs can cut it off of you.
Yeah, actually, side story to that. My wedding band is also made out of tungsten, and the reason why was because I tend to be pretty abusive with my hands, So I was like, I need something that's not going to mar or break or anything like that. And literally about a year ago, I was just walking around. Bee landed on my ring finger and stung me, and I was like, ow, and I flicked the bee off and then immediately took off my wedding band. And the person I was walking with said, that was a smart idea. And I was like, yeah, kind of a panic move, but
yeah, man, it was like, were those bees just like waiting in a nearby tree? Like, today's the day, boys. We're going to get that son of a bitch.
It was really wild too, because when the bee hit me and I swatted it off, the stinger was still sticking out of my finger. So I pulled the stinger out and then pulled my ring off. And I was like, God, the odds of that, right? What are the odds? Fun other thing, just for a guess. What do you know? What the chemical symbol is for tungsten?
Is it? If it's an obvious one, I would guess maybe TU.
It is not an obvious one.
Ah, damn it. Okay, is it something really stupid like XM?
It is something really stupid. It's W.
What? Tungsten?
Yeah.
Did Elmer Fudd make the periodic table? What's happening?
Actually, it's interesting. I went with it. The way I remember it is through a similar kind of like mnemonic, right? Where it's I just imagined that it was like Chekhov from Star Trek that found it, because it's Wungston.
Yeah. Yep. I like that.
Yep. So that's how I remember that one. But anyway, but one of the reasons why it's so strong is because so all metals when they're together, they form metallic bonds, which basically means that they are. So we went over this before, where it's like there's covalent bonds, ionic bonds, and then a whole bunch of like other ones that are kind of their own thing, So generally speaking, 99% of the time you can get away with covalent and ionic. And then, when you start to deal with things like metals, or there are things called metallo-ligand bonds, right? Where it's like metals bonded to organics, which are like trippy. Yeah. No, you can do all sorts of weird stuff with that. And it's just like, when I was in one of my classes, when I was looking at some of the stuff that they're able to do with that, I was like, are we supposed to be doing this? I don't think that we're supposed to be making some of this stuff. This doesn't occur in nature like ever. So, whoops. Anyways, we were so busy trying to figure out whether or not we didn't stop to think if we should. But with metallic bonds, is that basically, so with covalent bonds, they share, ionic bonds, they steal. Covalent, metallic bonds, they are so good at sharing that it is straight up like chemical communism, right? Like instead of just being like, oh, this carbon is sharing atoms or sharing electrons with this oxygen, it's like this metal is sharing electrons with this metal and the metal beside it and the metal beside it. The electrons just free flow all over the place. But they still do have to have this a certain configuration based off of the geometries of the orbital, right? So you've got like your s orbital, which is a big giant sphere. You've got your p orbital, which looks like kind of dumbbells. And so there's 2 dumbbells that are on the x-axis, 2 that are on the y-axis, and then 2 that are on the z-axis. So it kind of forms like, imagine if you kind of took like one of those fun balloons, right? Like party balloons, and you twisted it and then twisted them all together. It kind of looks like that. And then you get d orbitals, which look weird, and then you get f orbitals, which look even weirder.
You had to describe the second one with a party, like a clown's party balloon, and then there were two weirder ones.
Yes. Yeah, so the d orbital, it looks like, so each one, so it still has the X, Y, and Z axis, right? And it, instead of just being like 2 bulbs, it's 4 bulbs on each axis. So that's fine. But then you've got 2 more modalities, and they look just like, one of them looks like a circle on top of a circle with like a donut around it. And it's like, what are we doing? So I say all of that to say that tungsten forms a very specific lattice structure based off, because of what orbitals it has that it is allowed to fill. It forms a certain geometry that is actually very strong, which is why it has all of the properties that it has. So I really think that like that would be way cooler, is to say like, like tungsten is strong, but when we add tungsten and this very, very rare earth metal, which is actually in reality difficult to find, and then we, under very specific pressures and temperatures, we force them together so that way they form a very specific lattice, which would be similar to like Ice 9 or Ice 13. Ooh. Another episode that we did that you should check out. But if it was like, hey, we need to use these very specific generation methods in order to make it, I think that that's way cooler. Because do you know what the most expensive thing is on the Earth to create?
If I'm thinking of Superman Returns, it's land, but that's probably not what you mean.
You know what? That is fair and depressing, because it's like land's everywhere. It's really easy, but because of economics, right? But
yeah.
But
it's the one thing they're not making any more of, I think is what he says. Okay. What is the most expensive thing for us to? You're talking like a manufacturing process?
This is a thing we can make. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do 3 guesses, because I'm pretty confident you're not going to get this one. But if you do, then you be batting. So far, you're batting 1,000, right? Like you can fail. This is like you've got 100% in the class. You can fail the final at this point, right?
I'm going to throw this is not it, but this joke needs to get out of my head, which is gold from lead. So that's not it.
There you go. Nope. Because we can't do that.
I think I remember some goofy pop science article about how we are like running low on helium, because it's like really
we are. Yep.
It's really hard for us to like get more helium. So I would, it sounds like that's not it, but that would be one of my swags is helium.
No, but because we don't. So interestingly,
we harvest it. We don't manufacture it.
We harvest it. We don't manufacture it. We can kind of make it, because when a particle undergoes alpha decay releases a helium atom. That's what alpha decay is, but that's not like the way you want to make that.
That's a hard thing to scale up, it sounds like.
Yeah, right? Where it's like, okay, so we got all of this radioactivity in one place. This is okay, right?
Do that up there on the moon, maybe.
Yeah, no, very, very good guess.
Maybe something simpler than I'm imagining, like water.
Ooh, that would be cool. Water's actually relatively easy to make, because there's a whole lot of things that have oxygen in them, and then you can do chemistry and get it to get rid of its oxygen, and then you've effectively created water, through the process called hydrolysis. Hydro meaning water, and lysis meaning cutting.
Yes, that's how he makes the rocket fuel in The Martian. He does hydrolysis. Okay, so those are, I threw one away for the joke. It was worth it, but those were my 3 guesses.
Good. Antimatter. No,
it's
that's
okay.
what I was like.
Yeah. It's hard to make the thing that's the opposite of the thing.
Right. But it is a thing that we can manufacture. Like we have made antimatter, right? And then I'll stop playing the guessing game. But I feel like that this is kind of it, at least I think it's fun.
Does that feel Star Trek-y? Could you imagine going back to even just the 80s, not that long ago, and just being like, we're gonna manufacture antimatter, and it's like antimatter is not a real thing. That's a Star Trek thing, and it's like, just give it a minute.
Yep. Just give it a minute. Not only is it a real thing, but we could make it. But it's a little expensive. if you had to guess, how much do you think it costs to make a gram of antimatter? So, and a gram ain't much, right? You know,
No, I would guess that when you are actually doing this kind of process, that you're measuring like maybe literally by the atom, right? Where it's like we produced this many atoms in this like giant laboratory experiment. So if we're going all the way up to a gram, which is like an amount that I can actualize with like my monkey brain, tens of millions, maybe hundreds.
$62 trillion per gram.
Okay, I was like so many science things, I understood the thing, but there are just so many zeros. They're hard to keep straight.
Well, right, because you're like, because, and to be fair, you got the right thing where you were like a lot of money. You know? Yeah, and that is, the sentiment is correct, right? But it's like, no, like the entire GDP of the US to make a gram of the stuff, right? And so the reason why I mention all of that is because if antimatter is a thing that we can make, and it is so expensive to make because basically in order to make it, you have to use the Large Hadron Collider to magic it up. I don't know how that works, but I know that that's how we make it, right? And so it requires like a apparatus the size of a country to get things moving super fast, right? So it's just very, very expensive to make. So that there's your rarity right there, right? You know, where it's just like, oh, why doesn't everybody have a suit made out of vibranium? It's like, because to make a kilogram of the stuff costs $1 billion. So ta-da, there's your rarity. And on top of that, even the method to make it is so complex and expensive that only certain people can make it. And the technique to make it is like only some scientists can even understand the technique. I'm like, there's your magic. Let's stop doing, and to me that's more impressive than, hey, I am special because I found a particular rare shiny on the ground, thank God, right? It's like, no, like I am so adroit that I am able to make this particularly rare shiny, you know. So basically, to answer the original question, is vibranium real? No. But on top of that, should we be, I believe that, and you can call it whatever you want, but instead of being like, yes, we found vibranium and there are only limited ores on the planet, it's like, no, man, make it a manufacturing process. Like that made sense when, like, back in like the 30s and 40s, when all of the stuff, all of the metals that we found were metals that were on the ground and we could just make some alloys. But it's like, man, it's been like 100 years. Let's scale up our science fiction here a little bit.
Yeah, and modernizing where magic comes from, I think, is a sign that we have lost the plot a little bit with superhero stuff. But this does remind me of other magic I want to ask you about.